Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India Live, India's voice to the world. I am Tanvita Nija. Coming up in the next 30 minutes. India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar pitches hard for countering the three evils of terrorism, extremism and separatism at the SCO Heads of Government meet in Islamabad. Israel opens up some aid access for Gaza after the 30-day US ultimatum to make more help available for Gazans or to be prepared to lose some American military assistance. Zelensky presents his victory plan in the Ukrainian parliament with a blueprint to wrap up the war no later than 2025. The Kremlin taunts Ukraine to sober up. And Lionel Messi equals Cristiano Ronaldo's hat-trick record after a vintage performance for Argentina, which thrashed Bolivia 6-0 in the 2026 World Cup qualifier. A productive meeting of the SCO Council of Heads of Government concluded in Islamabad on Wednesday. India's External Affairs Minister signed 8 outcome documents. Posting on microblogging site X, the minister said that India made a positive and constructive contribution to the deliberations. He also said that India extends its best wishes to Russia as it takes over the SCO Council of Heads of Government presidency. Now let's understand the 8 key takeaways from the Indian perspective. External Affairs Minister Jaishankar wrote, developing a dialogue on the idea of one Earth, one family, one future. Outcomes of initiatives like SCO, Startup Forum, SWG on startups, innovations and traditional medicine welcomed by SCO members. Digital public infrastructure, digital inclusion becoming part of the SCO cooperation framework. SCO taking inspiration from Mission Life, that's Lifestyle for Environment, to achieving the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Enhancing global food security and nutrition through promoting use of climate resilient and nutritious grains such as millets. Upholding fair and balanced connectivity projects in accordance with international law, the goals and principles of the UN Charter and the SCO Charter. Emphasizing rules-based, non-discriminatory, open, fair, inclusive and transparent multilateral trading system with WTO at its core. Opposing perfectionist actions, unilateral sanctions and trade restrictions that undermine the multilateral trading system and impede global sustainable development. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar delivered India's statement at the SCO Council of Heads of Government meeting this morning in Islamabad. In his address, the minister flagged concerns over terrorism and extremism. He further added that SCO's primary goal of combating terrorism, separatism and extremism is even more crucial in the current times. He said it requires honest conversation, trust and good neighborliness, and reaffirming commitment to SCO Charter. SCO needs to be firm and uncompromising in countering the three evils, he said. After attending the SCO summit, the External Affairs Minister of India departed from Islamabad. On social media platform X, he thanked the Pakistan government for its hospitality and courtesies. The Israel and Hezbollah conflict also rages on with strikes from both sides, strikes hitting South Beirut early Wednesday. This comes less than an hour after the Israeli military ordered residents to leave part of the Lebanese capital. Smoke billowed from between buildings in Hareth Reik after the first strike, which followed Israeli military spokesman Avichai Adare telling people to leave the area. The Israeli military issued the new order for residents living in southern Beirut to evacuate the region, a warning which usually precedes strikes on the area pinpointed in the Lebanese capital against Hezbollah. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has opposed any ceasefire deal that would not halt Hezbollah from rearming. While speaking to French President Emmanuel Macron, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu said he was opposed to a unilateral ceasefire which does not change the security situation in Lebanon and which will only return it to the way it was. Netanyahu and the Israeli military have insisted that there must be a buffer zone along Israel's border with Lebanon where there is no presence of Hezbollah fighters. The United States has also asked Israel to improve the Gaza humanitarian situation in the next month or risk military aid. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, in a letter to Israeli officials, said that they must take steps within 30 days to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza to avoid legal action involving U.S. military aid. The letter cited Israel's denial of most humanitarian movements between northern and southern Gaza and burdensome and excessive restrictions on what goods can enter Gaza. State Department spokesperson Matthew Miller said that the letter was not meant as a threat but reiterated the urgency of increasing humanitarian assistance in Gaza.
That it's possible to get humanitarian assistance into Gaza. We know it can be done. We know that the various logistical and bureaucratic obstacles can be surmounted. And so it is incumbent upon the government of Israel to surmount those challenges and get assistance in.
Miller also spelled out reasons for the U.S. to give a 30-day window for the same.
To send a letter and just say this has to happen overnight. We give them make clear there's a short window in which we want to see changes because the humanitarian situation is so dire on the ground.
As the Russia-Ukraine war nears about 1,000 days of fighting, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky released a victory plan which aims at bringing an end to the ongoing conflict. The victory plan was presented to the Ukrainian parliament on Wednesday based on the inputs Zelensky received from Kiev's Western allies. The Ukrainian president criticized China, Iran, North Korea for their support to Moscow in Russia's more than two-year conflict with Ukraine. Zelensky has ruled out ceding the Ukrainian territory in his victory plan. He has also urged the West to lift restrictions on long-range arms. Along with this, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky also urged his country's allies in the West to extend an invitation to Kiev to join NATO as part of his plan to end Russia's invasion. He also called for deployment in Ukraine of a comprehensive force to deter more such Russian attacks. The Ukrainian president said that he will present this victory plan at the EU summit on Thursday. The Kremlin has dismissed the victory plan outlined by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, calling for bolstered Western support, saying it was some ephemeral peace plan. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that the only peace plan there can be is for Kiev regime to realize the futility of the policy it is pursuing and understand the need to sober up. The European Union on Wednesday held its first summit with the Gulf nation, the 6 Arab states, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates in the Gulf Cooperation Council meet discusses trade and investment, renewable energy, regional security and citizen issues such as visas. Middle East and the Russia-Ukraine conflict tops the agenda of the meet. European Council President Charles Michel met with Kuwaiti Prime Minister Sheikh Ahmed Abdullah Al Ahmed Al Sabah on Wednesday. The meeting came ahead of the first ever European Union and the Gulf Cooperation Council summit in Brussels. The bloc's aim is to make the relationship more strategic, recognizing those countries' influence, particularly in conflicts in Ukraine and West Asia. An EU partnership with 6 Arab states would cover trade and investment, renewable energy, regional security, and citizen issues such as visas. China's Taiwan Affairs Office has said on Wednesday that the country will not promise to renounce the use of force over Taiwan. However, it added, this is aimed at external interference and a small minority of separatists. China staged a day of large-scale drills around the island on Monday, it said were a warning to separatist acts following last week's National Day speech by Taiwan President Lai Ching-te. China has, over the past 5 years, sent warships and warplanes in the waters and skies around Taiwan on an almost daily basis.
We are willing to strive for the prospect of peaceful reunification with the utmost sincerity and endeavor. but we will never commit ourselves to renouncing the use of force. This is aimed at the interference of external forces and the very small number of Taiwan separatists for Taiwan independence and their independence activities, not the vast majority of Taiwan's people.
针对
On Wednesday, a security alert regarding a bomb threat was received concerning an Akasa air flight en route from Delhi to Bangalore. The flight had 174 passengers, 3 infants and 7 crew members on board. Following the standard safety protocols, the flight was promptly redirected back to the IGI airport, Delhi, where it landed safely. As of now, the aircraft has been positioned at an isolation bay and the airline, Akasa Air, is continuing to monitor the situation in coordination with local authorities. The curtain raiser for the 7th session of the International Solar Alliance ISA Assembly was hosted today in New Delhi. Leaders from 120 member countries to attend the 7th session of the International Solar Alliance Assembly in New Delhi from November 3rd to November 6th. DD India's Tapas Bhattacharya has more.
India will host the 7th session of the International Solar Alliance Assembly, a key moment in the global drive force towards a solar-powered future. From November 3rd to 6th, leaders from 120 countries, partner organizations and the private sector will convene at Bharat Mandapam in New Delhi to chart a course towards a sustainable solar-powered future.
Leaders from across the world will convert during the forthcoming 7th Assembly of ISA to promote the widespread adoption of the solar power.
India's Minister of New and Renewable Energy, Prahlad Joshi, highlighted ISA's evolution into a global platform and commended their remarkable progress in adopting solar energy.
I take this opportunity to call upon ISA members, signatories and prospective countries to unite on the threefold agenda at the upcoming assembly. 1. Empowering the member countries to adopt the solar energy as the energy source of choice. Make energy access universal by supporting the solar entrepreneurs to scale up the local solutions. Mobilize the finance to speed up the solar deployment.
This year's assembly will bring together ministers, missions and key stakeholders to discuss how solar energy can improve energy access, boost security and accelerate the energy transition, especially in regions with limited power.
We believe that we harmonize and aggregate the demand for solar finance, for solar technologies, and therefore create the demand for research and development. We also enable the capacity that is needed in various countries to adopt solar energy. We have aggregated projects which we are preparing and enabling for about 9.5 gigawatts.
With India and France leading the way, the Assembly will focus on strategies to increase solar deployment across the world. It's time to unlock the power of the sun, shaping a brighter tomorrow for everyone. Tapas Bhattacharya's report for DD India.
India's Minister of Commerce and Industry, Piyush Goyal, addressed the valedictory session at the first Indian Foundation for Quality Management on Wednesday. Emphasizing Modi government's efforts to build a quality ecosystem in India, he urged industry stakeholders to actively participate in positioning Brand India as a symbol of excellence, where products made in India are recognized globally for their high quality.
Until 2014, in India, we had only 14 quality control orders, only 14, covering about 106 products. In the last 10 years, we have expanded to 174 quality control orders, covering today's 732 products. A 7x growth or a 6x growth in 10 years. To ensure that more and more people become aligned with better quality standards.
Still to come on this edition of DD India Live. In the US battleground state of Georgia, voters turn out in record numbers. The rule requiring hand count of election ballots blocked by a judge. And India's TRAI chairman, Telecom Regulatory Authority of India chairman, calls for regulatory framework for OTT apps.
Complex issues, hidden agendas, twists and turns, strategic games. We think all dots are linked. We just need to connect them. Join me every week as I connect the dots to unravel hidden designs in statecraft, mysteries, and decode issues that matter to you. Watch Connecting the Dots with me at these times on DD India.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Live. I am Tanvi Taneja. Now, race to the White House is getting on its last lap. US presidential elections are scheduled for the 5th of November. Former President Donald Trump versus Vice President Kamala Harris. Both the candidates are campaigning in full swing. DD India's Amritpal Singh has more.
With just weeks left for November 5th, the day Americans vote to elect their new president, election campaigning here in the United States has reached a feverish pitch, with both candidates, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, crisscrossing the country in a last-minute bid to woo the voter, often trading barbs, making personal attacks, making tall promises, in Kamala Harris's case, doling out last-minute sops to woo the voter. I'm here right now at the famed Golden Gate Bridge of San Francisco. I took a stroll across this bridge to interact with the Americans, to read their mind, to understand what they think, what matters most to them as they prepare to vote on that Super Tuesday. And this is what they had to say.
I think there's a few issues that really matter, but at the top of my mind is like the Democrats' response to Israel-Gaza. I think the ongoing humanitarian crisis has really soured my perspective of the Democrats, unfortunately. And I think that's difficult to imagine that like a Trump term would be worse given just like how much of a crisis the Middle East is in right now.
There's a greater issue in reproductive rights when it comes to the two electees. I was talking about how there is a big polarizing factor between red states and blue states, and in Florida right now there's a very difficult time in getting abortions. It doesn't matter how old you are and what your circumstances if you don't get it within.
With inflation skyrocketing and the cost of living crisis worsening in the United States, according to the latest Pew research, 81% of the Americans say that inflation and economy will be a key factor in deciding their vote.
The economy, expenses, the border. Everything's too expensive.
Okay.
It's going up. Bidenomics is not working.
I think to have education is a right. And it should not be a privilege. I mean, there are people that could be in my place right now that would probably do a lot more, but they can't afford it, so yeah.
The biggest issue really just has to do with the economy. One thing we've been seeing a lot in the markets recently is just food prices going up, but wages not matching that. So I think making sure wages are affordable for everybody, people can afford their food, people can sustain their families. I think that's a big issue that factors into my voting choices.
One of the more explosive issues in this election season has been the issue of immigration, one of Donald Trump's key favorites. He continues to vilify immigrants in his rallies and debates, calling them rapists and murderers, while Kamala Harris has taken a more nuanced position, calling for a border security bill.
Well, for me, it's our national security. I think especially in this era, the U.S. needs to take national security in a different degree than it has in the past 20 or 30 years. I want a party that has a clear and cogent path forward with our border in Mexico, as well as our whole immigration policy. I think there's tons of people, really talented people trying to get here legally, and I think if we were able to capture some of those people, it would be incredibly powerful for us. So anyone who's thinking strategically about our immigration advantage would be huge.
So you heard the Americans. Come November 5th, and we'll get to know what the Americans decide for themselves. But one thing is certain, this election is important for both candidates. On the one hand, Kamala Harris has set her sights on becoming the first female president of the United States. On the other hand, Donald Trump is attempting a feat only once achieved in US history, regaining White House after losing it. With cameraman Sanjay Jaina, this is Amritpal Singh for DD India in San Francisco.
After concluding a successful visit to Algeria, India's President Draupadi Murmu arrived in Mauritania. The President landed at the Nouakchott International Airport on Wednesday and was greeted by the Mauritania President at the tarmac. The visit to Mauritania is the second leg of President's three-African nation tour. During her one-day visit, President Murmu is scheduled to hold bilateral meetings with the Mauritanian leadership and interact with the Indian diaspora. The President will visit Malawi from 17th to 19th of October for the final leg of the three-nation visit. The issues surrounding over-the-top or OTT communication apps require structured regulatory ambit following concerns from the law enforcement agencies and telecom carriers. India's top regulatory official, TRAI, was speaking on the sidelines of the India Mobile Congress 2024. TRAI also signed a bilateral agreement with the Saudi Arabian Telecom and Broadcasting Agreement for cooperation between the two bodies.
We have seen that the OTT communication is becoming a very strong and effective and useful medium for communication. At the same time, there are various regulatory issues being raised in respect of OTT communication, which is a common subject in discussion across the world. So we would be having this subject for discussion and exchange thoughts on how people are dealing.
India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi's call for the country showing the way when it comes to democratizing digital technology was welcomed by the telecom industry. They hailed Prime Minister's bold vision for Digital India and appreciated the government's emphasis on the need for a global framework for digital governance.
Well, I think that we are one of the leading vendors in mobile technology. We've been in this business since 150 years. That is difficult to be said. So we are completely supportive of the digital strategy of India. This is the tool that citizens use in order to digitalize their lives. And this is running because we build networks that make it possible. And because you have here some telecom operators that are investing a lot in order to reach every corner of the country.
Union Cabinet of India, chaired by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, on Wednesday approved an additional installment of DNS allowance to central government employees and DNS relief to pensioners, representing an increase of 3% over the existing rate of 50% of the basic pay pension to compensate against price rise.
कैबिनेट ने डीए और पेंशनर्स के लिए डीएनएस रिलीफ इसको 3% बढ़ाया है और टोटल 9,448 करोड़ एनुअली 9,448 करोड़ एनुअली हमारे सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट के एम्प्लॉयज़ के पे चेक में ऐड होगा.
India's envoy to Sri Lanka, Santosh Jha, addressed the 45th National Conference of CA Sri Lanka. In his address, High Commissioner Jha emphasized the importance of a robust partnership between India and Sri Lanka, highlighting the intertwined destinies of the two nations. He also called for a shift in the mindset to overcome past hesitations and actively pursue common goals. Ambassador Jha noted the rapid changes and complexities of the modern world, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region, and underscored India's economic trajectory.
We must work hand in hand and grow and prosper together. Like it or not, we are naturally intertwined and interlinked by geography, history, tradition, and by our future. We are irreplaceable, indispensable, and inextricable as partners. Any attempt to drive a wedge can only be detrimental to our shared future and for our shared aspirations. It will be a negative, not just for one side, but to the other as well. And that too in equal measure. We must therefore transcend old mindsets, overcome past hesitations, and actively work together for our shared goals, objectives, and aspirations. Very honestly, the world is perhaps a more difficult place than it has ever been in history. It is moving and changing at an unprecedented pace and scale and complexity. The Indo-Pacific today is the center of activity. It is the epicenter of global growth and dynamism. If one looks at the G20, the top 20 economies of the world, there are many more Indo-Pacific economies in the list than there were a few decades ago. Many global experts predict that India could emerge as the second largest economy as early as 2050. Not surprisingly, therefore, our Prime Minister has set a target to make India a developed nation by 2047, when we will celebrate 100 years of independence.
And on to some football action now. Real Madrid and France soccer star Kylian Mbappe has been accused of rape and sexual harassment at a Swedish hotel on October 10th following his recent trip to Stockholm. A Swedish prosecutor has opened a rape investigation after media reports suggested that Mbappe is the suspect. And Lionel Messi's hat-trick led Argentina to a comprehensive 6-0 win over Bolivia in CONMEBOL World Cup qualifying match. The 37-year-old treated his fans with 3 clinical finishes, 2 assists in a one-sided game. Messi, along with Alvarez and Martinez, gave Argentina a 3-goal lead in the first half. So that's all in this edition of DD India Live. Do let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and the world on our DD India mobile app. The app is available on both Android and iOS platforms. So we'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Tanvi Taneja from all of us here in New Delhi. Thank you for watching. Namaskar.